98% of the videos on the internet currently about Nintendo Switch 2 are about why it's amazing, why it's awesome, why it's going to be so cool, why it's going to be so great, why it has to come quick, why we've been waiting for it, why it's going to be the best Nintendo console ever, why it's going to continue Nintendo's success, why it's going to bring a new 3D Mario. You get the idea. This video is about why not to look forward to Nintendo Switch 2. And this is about the reasons that are, in my opinion, pretty valid, but I think we need to discuss them. So what's going on, everybody? It's Zach from SwitchForce. Happy Saturday morning to you if you're watching this on drop day, and if not, then hello on whatever day you're watching it. It might be a Monday, Thursday, Sunday, one of the seven. I got a 15% chance of figuring it out. But this comes from an article entitled Why I'm Not Looking Forward to the Nintendo Switch 2, and I didn't want to just dismiss it instantly. Look, I'm the biggest Nintendo fan on the block. I love Nintendo. I personally think the Switch 2 is going to be phenomenal and fantastic and all those glorious words that I started off the video with, but I didn't want to blow this off. Why would somebody not be looking forward to Nintendo Switch 2? And is it just like, oh, they don't want to spend money? No. They have valid reasons as they evaluate the game industry in its current state and what Nintendo has been doing. And the basis, sort of the foundation of this argument, is that as time goes on, Nintendo looks more and more outward rather than inward. And in many ways, Nintendo looking outward is an exciting thing. A region-free system, a more fully featured online, bigger and better games, more interfacing with third parties, bringing aboard indie studios. They've done a lot of great things, including identifying that their hardware power is something that needs to pick up the steam in the next generation. Now, I don't believe that Nintendo is going to fall flat on their face. I don't think Nintendo is going to repeat the Wii U mistake. I have no fear that Nintendo will mess up the next generation. I don't think they're going to come up with a horrible name. I don't think they're going to come up with a lackluster launch lineup. I think they're going to kill it. But in making those efforts to dominate with the next system, this article poses the question of what if it's all a mistake? And they bring up the idea, and I'd love to know your take on this in the comments, about how the current biggest problem in the gaming industry is that games are too expensive, take too many people, take too much time, and therefore are a humongous risk that need insane returns to justify their existence. Or they lead to layoffs, closures, major disappointment, and the end of certain game franchise. So the fear is if Nintendo gives in to the, quote, industry pressures of better graphics, more involved games, more complex games, they put forth this Switch 2 that has a lot more power, a lot more oomph. Is it something that then will extend the game development time, take more people to work on, and potentially lead Nintendo into a Sarlacc pit of their own creation? I think that the first half of that statement is very true. I think games will cost more. I think games will take more time. I don't think that Nintendo, though, is going to run themselves into the ground. Look, this is Nintendo, and they're not going to vacate their core values just because they're building better graphics. I think it's so foreign to us that Nintendo would have comparable graphics to the other consoles because we've been used to them for generations being nowhere near the cutting edge. But I think it's important to remember that Nintendo at one point was pretty cutting edge. They were pretty darn at the forefront and the face of the industry when it came to technology. The NES, the SNES, the N64. The Mario 64 demos, craziness. The Mario 128 idea and demos, craziness. Nintendo was really pushing things further and farther and faster than anyone else. And yet their game design, their philosophy, it retained the charm and the gameplay focus that it still has to this day. Now, the article expresses other concerns like, what if Nintendo starts charging $70 for games like Sony and Microsoft are? What if Nintendo starts making more games as services titles? Like, we never thought Nintendo would dabble into mobile. They've become a pretty substantial presence in the mobile scene. What if Nintendo starts making all of these microtransaction games? What if they start making games as services? What if they continue to follow the industry trends in those directions and they become a shell of themselves? And I would imagine that Furukawa's business focus, his idea to keep the company in a very profitable state, and the fact that they are just a company brings about some of these fears. In fact, the article states like Nintendo exists to make profit, and I cannot argue that. I will not deny that. I think that's 100% the truth. But I think more than most companies, and you could attribute this to their history, to their more Eastern ideology, to the older generation that they still have working there, folks like Aonuma and Miyamoto, I think that the legacy of Nintendo means a lot to them. I think there is a standard of quality that maybe doesn't yield like a 9 out of 10 game every time, but that prevents Nintendo from turning into a husk of their former selves. No matter what you think about Nintendo's every move, they are very consistent in some critical ways. They're very consistent in gameplay being the focus. They're very consistent on relying heavily on their familiar faces and their favorite franchises. They're very consistent on delivering games at their pace when they feel it's time and kind of disregarding, in many ways, the public opinion. Now, I think that they balance this notion of moving in the direction of the industry, moving in the direction of progress, with staying staunch in their values and their ways. Sometimes this bites them in the butt. We get Animal Crossing, and man, that game would have been perfect for a games as a service game, but they did not make it that. And I think Animal Crossing New Horizons is actually a really solid example of why I have faith in Nintendo, because Animal Crossing New Horizons had a chance to be the game that Nintendo could milk for the entire generation. And what did Nintendo do? They let that thing ride, and then they let that thing die, and they ignored the millions of dollars that was being demanded to be handed over. Fans, YouTubers, the likes were all wanting for more content for that game and would have gladly, happily paid for it. Yet Nintendo was like, we're going to move on. Because in our heads, Animal Crossing New Horizons is this type of game. The AC franchise is this type of game. And we want to keep it that way. And there are times where that's very frustrating, right? Like in the case of Animal Crossing New Horizons, in the case of some of their franchises that don't see flexibility, in the case of some of their releases that seem very much the antithesis of what they should do, in their constant use of remakes and re-releases. But it does show that they are unwilling to break certain facets of their identity. And in some ways, that's harmful and frustrating. In some ways, that's going to be the thing that keeps their legacy going forevermore. I do not foresee a future where Nintendo betrays themselves and becomes the company that some of you may fear they become. I think it's totally plausible that Nintendo does experiment with the $70 price tag they already have with Tears of the Kingdom. I think it's totally plausible that Nintendo experiments with live service games in the same way that they experimented with mobile games. I do not think that either of these things, nor the increase of power for the hardware, will lead Nintendo down a poor path. If anything, I think this will only lead Nintendo down a stronger, more stable path that allows them to take even more risks. One of the biggest fears of long game development time, high cost, and huge team size is that it does not allow you to take risks. I would contend that Nintendo's strategies have allowed them the ability to take many risks. They have doubled down on so many things that have done them well in the past that they now have the opportunity, the fan base, and most importantly, the consumer base to take those risks. In some ways, you could argue that Breath of the Wild was a risk. It is a dungeonless 3D Zelda when dungeon-filled 3D Zeldas were the big hitters. And look how that paid off for them. In some ways, Mario Wonder was a risk, switching up the art style, the voice actor, and sort of the tone of the titles. And look how that worked out for them. In many ways, releasing back-to-back Mario RPGs was a risk, and yet they're doing it, and it seems like they're doing it with quite a lot of success. I think Nintendo is an enigma. I think they're a company that will frustrate you with their lackluster directs, their lack of communication, and sometimes their backwards ways. And I think Nintendo is a company that will elate you and make you squeal because they do hold true to values that helped them establish themselves as a phenomenal video game developer and publisher back in the 80s and 90s, and they still rely on that mentality today, and it brings us things that nobody else can bring us. I think more power should be applauded from Nintendo and not feared. I think Nintendo will utilize this power in a very smart way, and that's evidenced by the fact that they're not going to make a dedicated home console that's $600 that is just like pushing as many teraflops as humanly possible. What are they doing? They're going to make another Switch type system, a portable system, a hybrid system, and one that emphasizes DLSS technology. This is Nintendo doing a very Nintendo thing. It might not seem like it because DLSS is good technology. It is, quote, like modern technology, but it's Nintendo saying, hey, how can we make this console cheap to make, cheap enough for consumers, but still achieve power? And I don't believe the power Nintendo is trying to achieve is for their own amazing, massive, huge, crazy Mario game that has an 80-hour story and a million side quests and feels like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I think the point of that is to please their fans, and it's to allow them to stay relevant, and it's to allow them to attract third parties. And if anything, Nintendo will rely on and allow third parties to carry the torch of technological progress forward while they themselves maintain a gameplay focused, artistically styled focused game development philosophy. I don't think this power is going to be used for Mario to look like a human. You're not going to have Mario and Chris Pratt being modeled for the next 3D Mario game, and oh my gosh, the animations are so lifelike. That's not what Nintendo is going to use the power for. They may use it for a more amazing, lively world. They may use it for a bigger, better game. I don't think they're going to use it to just push technology for technology's sake and to push their development teams to make infinite assets. I personally think that the biggest fear on this list that will come true is the $70 price point. And I honestly, as much as it stinks, like Nintendo has been the longest holdout, and for that I applaud them. I think that inevitably games are going to go up in price. They always have. They always continue to climb. And Nintendo being one that has stuck out the $60 price tag longer than most, even when they proved they could definitely do it with Zelda, we have not seen another $70 game since Tears of the Kingdom. And so I think they are smartly and thankfully waiting till the Switch 2 to implement that price point. I don't think that should be applauded in terms of like, yay, $70, but I also don't think it should be feared or worried or hated because Nintendo has held out the longest. I think the Switch 2 is going to be a better system than the Switch 1, and I think it's going to lead to more success than the Switch 1. I've been saying this for a bit now, but I do believe that Nintendo being able to attract more third-party games, more day-and-date multi-platform releases, and more of an industry like, okay, they are an equal in some ways, with these other consoles, is only going to yield better results. If they can tidy up the system, if they can make the UI better, the eShop actually run like a modern thing instead of an old 1990s website, if they can continue to develop amazing games and evolve their franchises and bring cool ideas to the forefront and maybe even develop some new IP and new series and bring out the next version of Splatoon, not in Splatoon 4, but like what is the next Squid Kid that's going to join the ranks of Nintendo's iconic characters. I'm very excited for Switch 2. I don't think you have much to worry about, and I do not fear Nintendo going down a dangerous path for all the reasons I mentioned. But I'd love to hear from you and hear what you have to think and what you say about this. Do you worry that Nintendo could get down a dark path where they become so money hungry and so focused on progress that they abandon what has made them successful in the first place? That would be a scary sight. I think it would be doomful for Nintendo, but I don't believe they'll go that route. So let me know your take. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Hope you guys enjoy these videos. If you do, definitely hit that like button. It helps out a lot. And until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, stay positive out there. Love you lots. SwitchForce out.